research software. Okay. Yes, recording. I'm Sandra Gesing. I'm the Executive Director of the US Research Software Engineer Association, and I'm a senior researcher on San Diego Supercomputer Center. And with that, I will open my slides because I also restarted the computer and everything just to make sure that it's not on my side. That's the Wi-Fi is not working. Let me find some other slides here. So I also see of course. Sorry for this. Since I did start everything new, it somehow does not show me the slides at the moment. But I can start to talk already. So we have started with this working group in the 7th plenary. So today we are in the 22nd. So that is a big difference. And now I know what I'm doing. So we are existing for a while. We are talking also a little bit about the results today from the working group we had on FAIR for virtual research environments. And Seeming, do you have the Google Drive for me where we have our slides? Something is going on really not how I planned it.
Hi Sandra, I've put a link in the chat here of the there's a folder that was linked in the collective notes there to some slides. I think that might be the right one.
Yeah, exactly. I know it's my connection is still a little bit flaky, but the audio is okay.
Yes, audio is okay. But do you want me to share the slides for you?
That would be cool.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just put it.
Because it has opened it, but it is really slow.
Yes. So I turn this into the share mode, the presenter mode at that moment. Is that
you need to click on slideshow.
Oh, I never use Google. So where is this?
It's to the right of where you were, just at the top slideshow. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, technology, we will solve it. So I will give a little bit an introduction to the interest group. So next slide. So when we look at research computing, there's really nowadays the increased complexity of research questions. So we can answer questions nowadays we could not even ask maybe 10, 15 years ago. We have big data, a lot of, different data infrastructures. We have the hardware, increased complexity of hardware and software, and also really the skills required to use this all and to address the questions. And there's a greater need for openness and reproducibility because it's really driving policy questions. There are interdisciplinary distributed projects. If we look at projects like, for example, for COVID-19, these were worldwide projects to address really how to move on, how to find solutions. And we need a better workforce preparation. Next slide. And that also, no, sorry. back. So that means we need these end-to-end solutions that provide really everyone with broad access to the advanced resources and allow everyone to tackle today's challenging science questions. And that leads to science gateways. Next slide. So if we look at the environment, so there are lab instruments, there are web-based agile frameworks, a lot of new developments. There are a lot of new developments in distributed data and computing infrastructures. We have high-speed networks. We have worldwide high-speed networks. We have research software, and we have data and compute-intensive problems. And next slide. And the researcher looks like a little bit unhappy researcher in the middle of all this. Next slide. And that shows the need for science gateways to make out of maybe a little bit overwhelmed researcher a happy researcher. Next slide. We need to see the happy researcher. Next slide. So if you look at the timeline of the interest group, so it started with the 7th plenary, and really the kickoff of the interest group. Then we had different topics, really from interoperability across different systems to coordinating sustainable sorry, research environment and multiple infrastructures. Yeah, sustainability was for a while more our topic than really looking at transforming data into knowledge, new concepts and technologies with reproducibility. Then we looked at a common reference model and a reference architecture. And from there, we went really into the topic from communicating and collaborating and our visions for the next 10 years, and to the topic of fair. Is fairness sufficient, for example, to increase trust in VREs and to foster critical thinking? And then we had the building of the working group, Fair for Virtual Research Environments, and we had the draft recommendations for making VREs fair and fair enabling. And with that, next slide. So yeah, with the interest group, we want really to have this ongoing community effort, which is open-ended and where we can have these discussions. So we had the working group, the interviews for a 10 years vision, because yeah, if you want to have something in 10 years, you have to soon start really develop technical solutions to have it in 10 years, ready when it should be used. And the second working group was really fair for VREs. And now you can tip several times because it's, a lot of working groups are now showing up. Tip several times. Sorry. Yeah. The working groups you want to build, make suggestions. We are happy, to discuss what are the topics for the next working group. The interest group will be really around supporting the working groups and then to continue the discussion around virtual research environment. Next slide. So when we look at FAIR, I think, FAIR is discussed often at RDA, so I think everyone knows the principles probably. It's findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And there are the FAIR guiding principles for scientific data management and stewardship. And we were also part of looking into FAIR principles for research software. And a lot of different organizations are looking into this. Next slide. So FAIR for Virtual Research, my working group, existed of, for 1.5 years now. What we try to do, or what we have done, is to do really the principles for virtual research environments, science gateways. We use it as a synonym. And we started with the FAIR principles or research software because there's a lot of overlap. So we did build on the existing solution. Next slide. So the complexity is different than really for research software, for software solutions, because we have two target groups here. We have the Science Gateway developers or virtual research environment developers and the users. And the granularity is different. So if you look at virtual research environments, we can look at them as software frameworks. So there's a lot of overlaps like for FAIR for software. And but we can see also virtual research environment have services, or they work with APIs, or they have integrated workflows. So there are a lot of virtual research environments like Galaxy, they're directly integrated workflows. They have integrated data, that they're working with simulations. So the virtual research environment itself includes, again, research objects that can be fair. Next slide. So therefore, we looked a little bit to distinguish between fair versus fair enabling. The science gateways themselves, a software framework, should be fair. So they should be easily discoverable and accessible. They should interoperate with other digital research infrastructures. They should, have a technical architecture with components and services that should be reusable. And the components then inside FAIR that makes it a science gateway, a virtual research environment, should enable fairness. And the digital object it includes. Next slide. So if you look at findable, it is easy to find, it should be easy to find VREs to use and easy to find components of VREs to reuse for humans and for machines. And it should be easy to find digital objects produced by or within a virtual research environment for both humans and machines. Next slide. So we really started with the FAIR principles for software. And there are these different rules, and I'm not going into the detail of every rule. We have now a couple of slides where we explain everything. I'm happy to discuss details, but this is more really to give an overview. So for example, here we looked for, the first guiding principles for findable for software, and the VRE and its metadata are assigned globally unique and persistent identifiers. Yes, we think it's required if relevant. So next slide. And you see we have a couple of links also, and we can give you the URL to the different examples we have. So for example, we think that a fair VRE should require that it's described with rich metadata. It's always important to have the metadata. Next slide. And so you can see in the required, recommended, or in potential in that column. So for example, we say, metadata clearly and explicitly includes the identifier of the VRE it describes, it should be required. The VRE is registered or indexed in a searchable result required. Fair enabling now, when we start, see it's a distinguishment between fair and fair enabling. If the VRE provides a long-term storage service, it should make it possible to assign PIDs to the hosted digital objects. So that is a different step. That is really looking into the content of a VRE, and that is recommended, very relevant. Next slide. And we have, distinguished them really between fair enabling. So you see the next route. We looked at they're recommended, they're relevant. I'm sorry, next slide. I know I go, yes. Accessible. So now let's say everything is findable. So then accessible means it's important that the user finds the required VRE, and has the required authentication and authorization. And if the included digital objects which are hosted in a particular VRE, they need to know how to access this one, because there's a difference between accessing the Science Gateway itself and its content, because some might be shared in a group, some might be openly accessible, some might be private. Next slide. And also here we decided again to, distinguish between FAIR of the VRE, of the Science Gateway, and FAIR enabling. And one of the examples is, for example, a VRE and its metadata are accessible by their identifiers using a standardized communication protocol that should be required. The protocol used to access the VRE is open, free, and universally implementable. Also should be required from our point of view. Next slide. And you see we also followed here the logic with the FAIR enabling for the content. So there's an open data handbook, for example. We have guidance on APIs. We have guidance on access rights. Next slide. We can go more into detail. Can you go back to, it's next to the, next slide. And interoperable, that gets more complex. So findable and accessible are often the topics that are easier to achieve. Interoperable, really interoperating with other virtual research environments, with storage infrastructure, with compute, with software, and APIs that needs more distinguishment. And also the data outputted by VRE usually needs to be integrated with other data. So that is important. Or the software that is outputted by a VRE integrates with other software by exchanging data and or metadata. Or, through interaction via APIs and described through standards. Next slide. So also here you see we have the FAIR and the FAIR enabling. We recommend that the VRE software reads, writes, and exchanges digital objects in a way that meets domain-relevant community standards, because that is here the difference. A lot of domain have their own standards. And so it has to build on that. And there could be, for example, a RESTful API. TAPIS is one of the frameworks that has a RESTful API. Next slide. As I said, we can go into more details in the discussion, but I would go now to the next slide also from here. Here's the distinguishment. Reusable. This is the ultimate goal of FAIR, to optimize the reuse of digital objects, and to achieve this metadata and data should be well described so that they can be replicated. And VREs are both, usable and reusable. So that is the take we had on this. Next slide. And to make really a VRE reusable, we required that it's best represented as a software package. So it should have a license, maybe an open license. It doesn't have to be, but it should have a license. And so any license information should be available in a machine-readable form from the landing page. And where a VRE is offered as an online service, it should have clear terms and conditions of use displayed on the VRE website. Next slide. So we looked at the recommendation for online VREs, for a software type VREs, where we have FAIR enabling, where provenance information on digital objects that are in the VRE are there, and relevant discipline-specific metadata should be there. Next slide. So with that, if you want to talk more about the guidelines and everything, we can bring up the slides again. But with that, first, thanks. And we can stop sharing here. Thank you so much. And with that, I give it for an introduction to theming.
Yeah. Thanks, Sandra. So, okay, I also prepared some slides to introduce myself and also the VRE work. Let me just find my slides. Right. Just to confirm, you can see my slides, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Jimin Zhang. I'm from University of Amsterdam and also a VREsVirtual Lab Innovation Center. So who am I? So in the last 10 years, I've been actually has been an active player in the ENVRE community, work with the European S3s in the cluster of the environmental and earth sciences. We work with more than 20 research infrastructures. Each of them are pan-European scale. Focus on specific aspects of the environmental earth science subdomains, including atmosphere, solid earth, marine, and also biodiversity and ecosystems, and work with those communities to tackle the challenges of the surface interoperability in the data management life cycle, and also to work together with them to make their data sets and research software verified. So basically, this collaboration has been done through a number of projects, from the earliest one in 2011 called ENVRE, and then 3 years later, we got ENVRE Plus, and later there's ENVRE Fair, and recently we started another one called ENVRE Hub Next. So during these projects, we developed this a reference model for describing research infrastructures and based on the data management life cycle, and that reference model being later used to guide the development of the services, which become a portfolio in ENVRE Plus, and that later being used by the infrastructure to verify their services and data catalogs. So at the end, we are building a kind of hub. It's a kind of software layer. You could see this as a platform which overarching different infrastructures to enable the end user to discover the research assets from different infrastructures from the let's say a kind of integrated environment. And from there, we provide tools like search engine, knowledge base, catalogs, and virtual research environment to enable the let's say scientific research activities. One of these activities is to calculate essential climate variables. Yeah, but this is the ongoing activities. And that's the first thing I did, or I was doing. And then I'm also the technical managers in the LifeWatch infrastructure. It's one of these 24 infrastructure in the ENVRE community, but specifically focused on biodiversity and ecosystems. So it's an infrastructure across 8 countries and has 3 common facilities, including the ICT core, which is located in Spain. And then there is a service center in Italy. And the third one is the virtual lab, virtual laboratories and innovation center, which is located in Amsterdam, co-located with our university. So basically, I coordinate these, let's say, the development activities for research, for virtual research environment, and then make it as operational service to serve the research communities across Europe. Through LifeWatch, we also participate in different projects to contribute the customized or co-development of the virtual labs, which for specific domains, for instance, Ecolida or phytoplankton communities. And besides that, I'm also chair a research group in the University of Amsterdam, which is called Multi-Scale Networked Systems. So in that group, basically, we do research in computer science, look at cyber infrastructure, cloud computing, data management challenges. The way we do research is to to abstract the scientific problems from the use cases, from our partner. And those partners are basically from the research infrastructures and through different projects like Blue Cloud 2026, EVERSE. EVERSE is a project that specifically look at the research software quality control. And Airtel Life is a project to look at how to build advanced software like a digital twin to enable researchers to do predictive studies. And we try to get those these research, we conducted from the university research group, and then through the research prototype, we get mature ones and promote it as a kind of operational service and presented to the LifeWatch infrastructure through the Virtual Lab Innovation Center. So that's the way how the group or activities are managed. So one of the challenges, one of the activities we conducted in the past few years on the virtual research environment is to look at how to make the Jupyter Notebook as the basis to support the activity in the virtual research environment. Or in other words, can we build a virtual research environment based on Jupyter Notebook? The reason we look at the Jupyter Notebook is because it is being used as widely used in the data science AI communities to build small models, pipelines. But Jupyter has also its own limits because it's often deployed on let's say infrastructure. It could be the load on your laptop, which has relatively small capacity, but it could also be on cloud. But in any way, that is always a kind of infrastructure with predefined capacity. So the thing is, you always see, the Jupyter users sometimes have challenges to discover remote resource like data sets, software, notebooks from, repositories, which is not part of your Jupyter environment. And sometimes the user has to switch to the other environment and discover them and bring it back. And the second, limits we often observe is how to run the heavy workflows or bigger notebooks with large data sets or more complex models, using the remote infrastructure, which is not part of your infrastructure where you deploy the Jupyter Hub, for instance, or Jupyter Lab. And the collaboration with remote users, not only sharing the notebook as a static document, but also engage user to do the interactions with the notebook at runtime. When you look at something happening in your environment, can we engage other users, interactively collaborate with you? So these are the features we think is missing, in a native ecosystem, native software ecosystem with Jupyter. Of course, there are lots of things happening to improve it. But the time when we start this work, some years, 4 years earlier, that time, these things are really the missing parts. So the way we try to, make this as a virtual research environment, of course, we have to make these, gaps bridged. So one way we did that is we try to look at those missing features from the workflow part, because this is one of the core activities data scientists or AI modelers, they often face. So can we make the notebook as a kind of workflows, by looking at the cells, the code cell in the notebook? If that cell, can be seen as a reusable components to serve multiple, let's say, processes, can we just make this as a reusable building block, for instance, by containerizing it and make it as a surface? So we start to build a tool and embed that in the Jupyter as extension. And then based on the containerized components, then you could also use in the Jupyter environment to compose them as a workflow for those building blocks has heavy work, let's say the heavy computing bottlenecks. Then can we, by adding something like a split or merge to parallelize that computation, and by using like a data parallelization or model parallelization techniques, which is actually quite mature in the HPC or distributed computing communities. And then we could also, add the automation part as an engine and include that, and to complement the current client server architecture of the Jupyter. So if they see this workflow has this, primitives to scale out the computation, then we automate this orchestration to the remote cloud. So these are the exercises we did a few years earlier, and to expand the Jupyter. And then continue with this, we could identify more, missing features from the Jupyter. For instance, the search functions, knowledge base, how can we, build this information from a certain communities to enable the discovery of multiple catalogs using, semantic search. And then can we make these, the automation of the workflows and access to different data sources through, AI infrastructures, and using these distributed ledger like blockchain techniques to enable peer-to-peer sharing of their, digital assets with user, customizable policies. And using this as an idea, so at the end we made a prototype. It's called a virtual research environment. The name is called a notebook as a virtual research environment. It's deployed in the LifeWatch as a service. So there we distinguish one concept here. VRE is a software platform. You operate it by your infrastructure, but then the community enters the virtual research environment, try to establish their own lab. Virtual lab, virtual research environment. So this is the two levels of the concepts we try to distinguish. So what you have here is you have the operator of the VREs. You run the software of the virtual research environment on the infrastructure through like a cloud or Kubernetes middleware. And on top of that, you have the virtual lab developers. They work with the scientists using your platform, and you create a kind of instance using the software, libraries, tools provided by the VRE. And then through that virtual lab, the end user, in this case, would be the scientists. They can make use of the components, tools offered through virtual labs to build workflows, to do studies, and then to generate their data products and published or share with the community. And this work later has been tried together with LifeWatch, in the ecosystem or ecology communities, to see, can we help the ecologist to build a new way to study ecosystem. Ecosystem is very complex, it's a very large scale. And if you want to understand the some kind of let's say inference on the ecosystem through certain conditions, you cannot really do the physical experiments because ecosystem is the shared environment for all of us. The way you want to do that is, can we start to, make a kind of digital representation of the ecosystem? And then through the digital representation, and then we could apply different conditions and then formulate it as scenarios so that we could understand with different conditions what will happen, on the ecosystem. And that basically will be the things we want to implement using these virtual research environment techniques. And if you look at a digital twin, of course, the fundamental part of the digital twin is a model. We need actually to model the different aspects of the large complex systems. And the model usually exists as small, let's say, entities in the modular computers. So that actually matches a little bit to, this Jupyter environment which we just explained. So the scientists will use that to, to make a kind of conceptual composition, which of course that will require the data models from different places, and then with some kind of connections which allow scientists can understand, okay, what are the gaps between different models and how to validate the connections between two different models. Are there anything we still need extra data to validate, etc., etc. So that basically will be encapsulated as a kind of visual lab using the techniques offered by the underlying VREs. So basically, if you look at this context from the FAIR process, of course, this would be the kind of situations. We have the providers of the data and have the providers of the of the models. And then through different communities, and these communities could be the community of the data or model providers or virtual lab developers or digital twin developers. So can we set up some kind of virtual labs and to enable the research on coupling those models together and build a digital twin? Of course, digital twin at the moment still have different definitions. There are lots of projects recently funded in a European framework program. Still, this is still a kind of open challenge. People try to understand, what is exactly the digital twin? What would be the kind of, maturity level, etc. But that is something, I think we're going to find it out. So let's say this session. So the thing is, if we look at this fairness of the VREs and the assets inside the virtual research environment, I would like to bring few things to discussion. If you look at this, the context of the virtual research environment, we have VREs as a software platform, which is generic. It provides generic technologies. And through these, virtual lab developers, they build some kind of customized, small instantiated, let's say, environment for a specific group of user, which is, we call this virtual lab. Inside, of course, you have more content. You could decide to load which part of the catalog should appear in, which virtual labs, and what would be the kind of, the policies to enable the access and interactions. And of course, the user of the virtual lab could also have their own policy to decide in a different stage of the development, who can they, who they want to share, the assets. So, and inside the virtual labs, these assets, of course, will really become the content part. And the provider of the content could be outside of the virtual lab, and some of the providers would be inside your virtual lab. They make use of the virtual lab tools to produce the new assets. The users, of course, sometimes also part of these, the creator of the new assets. So what would be the way, what kind of incentive model we can define here to encourage, the different assets, different players in these assets, life cycles, like producer, consumer, user, or creator, etc. How to encourage there to verify their, their assets, and how to define some kind of, measurable, the things like a badge, to incentive these activities, etc. So I put these slides here just, for the discussion. I'm going to stop the sharing, and then maybe next panelist can also, present, and afterwards we can discuss it. So Sandra, done. Yes, now
Yes.
I'm done.
Thank you very much, Steven. Yes. So I have seen, I checked again in the other panelist. Unfortunately, he might have also, problems, technical problems. So, Steven, sorry, you are the only one of the panelists, today here in the repeat session. I apologize for that. I think, so Kiran was sure that he could make it. Something must have, interrupted that. And he's from Australia, so maybe with the time also something, I think it's in the middle of the night for him too. But so that is good that, you had also a longer introduction, seeming. So with this, even so we don't have now several panelists, I would ask you the question, it's in Melbourne, it's okay, that is not bad. So there must be something else if it's only almost 6 p.m. and not middle in the night. I thought this time was not so good for him. Something happened. So yesterday he still answered that he would join. So seeming how can we make it really, in your opinion, easier for users to follow FAIR principles? Because it's always more work. It's not that it comes with a cost.
Yes. One of the observation we had during the recent project at Your Life is, when we start to talk to different data providers in the ecosystems, and we say, okay, your data is so important for building digital twins. And then we still see a kind of big gap there. That is how to make these data providers who collect the data, during the past 10 years, they don't really see how their data will be used by the digital twin developers. Of course, the developer of the digital twins, they know the data they are looking for. So I think to incentive this, there will be something, I think it has to be some kind of strong use case and understood by their side to really motivate them, be part of this, process, not look at the, just say, okay, please verify your sense. if they don't know the actual value, actual impact they can generate. So it's always a challenge task.
So
one thing I think, at least in the At Your Life project, we found is, the follow some kind of, case studies through agile process to engage the data providers, let them be part of the game. And then they see, okay, which level of reusability, interoperability is really needed. Make something searchable, accessible. Probably it's relatively easy. We could even standardize certain processes. But the second part is more time-consuming, needs the effort from their side. Yes.
yeah, I think everyone, if you make your deep dive into interoperable and reusable, it's a different level of complexity to
Yes.
really follow through with that. I totally
And the
agree.
reusability to me, and also interoperability, it's really based on the cases. And especially interoperability, probably it's an endless task, isn't it? For certain purpose, it is interoperable sufficiently. But when there is a new case comes, and you found some gaps there, and then you still have to continue this effort, to align the current schema, to another one, to enable a different level of interoperability. So that really needs to be driven by certain cases, use cases. Let people see, what is the boundary? What is the kind of goal? Otherwise, they will just say, okay, when is these things we can say we are verified?
Yeah, and I fully agree to that. The other thing is, I think also giving, recommendations means also, yes, we recommend to do this, but if users recognize like, okay, if this is not so hard, maybe they go the next step. So starting with findable and accessible first and leading users to that, I think is really helpful.
Yes.
And I really also like that some of the providers, like Zenodo, they're looking into to make it easier, that it's easier usable to become fair with data, with virtual research environment, that there are certain steps that people can go through. The publishers are looking into that. We have seen that in some demonstrations. So I think it's important that we support as providers, developers, means that it gets easier for
the
researchers.
I think for the VRE developer, I think we should definitely embed those kind of let's say interfaces in the tool, in our tool chain, to make sure the users, at any phase, if there is reach certain maturity, which they have intended to publish certain or make something verified, that technical threshold should be very low. They do not have to go to different systems to do that. It would be nice we pop up some menus, let them fill in certain basic information. Some contextual information should even be able to grab it from the virtual labs or virtual research environment. Then we help them generate the required metadata.
Yeah. So for example, with the project, the preservation quality tool, what we did from content, we would create, automatically some metadata tag and show it to the users whether they agree, whether they want to have their let's say data object, their simulations, their programs tagged like that. And I think often to get already suggestions makes it easier to say, oh yeah, I like this, oh, I don't like that. So it's a start to support this. With that, even so it's a small panel, I still would like to open to audience questions. And I just would also be part of the panel. I don't leave Seeming alone in this role.
There is a comment, I think Ras put in the chat. Maybe you can just speak out.
Yeah, I just made a small comment that I think as we're seeing today, we are in the sort of start of the thinking of reuse of others' data among scientists. And I think as we see it become more and more prevalent, we will see the effect that has been on publications in previous year. In the beginning of the last century, we saw an increase in the references and uses of publications in scientific writing. Rather than having monographs, you had much more references, starting to have more things like that started to happen. I think we will see the same thing happening, but on the data side, because as we see, then the extra cost will become part of the normal way of doing research. As we see these VREs, we see these things starting to be more and more accessible and used. I think we will see that the motivation to the scientist will be easier. And related to this, I was thinking a little bit about how do you see, so we have the reuse of data, but how do you see the idea of some data might be easier to just reproduce anew if you have the correct metadata for how the data was produced in the first place? How do you see the balance between reuse of old data that may or may not be particularly accurate and the reproduction of old data through new methods by accessing things like rich metadata? How do you see that will progressing in the context of digital twins and other things like this?
So
You want to
yeah,
start, or
I
should
can
start?
can try to because I can try to answer this a bit, because in the this issue indeed often pops up in the ETH Life community. People say, okay, you want to build something, but you miss certain data. There are certain data there, and using the AI to generate certain data sets based on the meta information. That of course is a approach people often try. Or use through these virtual labs to use crowdsourcing and encourage people to collect these missing data points. Ecosystem is often, the situation. We have lots of data, but the data are very sparse. Some data, is only concentrated on certain area, and then you have bigger area. There is no data points collected. Yeah, it is still big, let's say, challenge it's faced by these communities, especially when you want to build a large model for a bigger system in the digital twins. And there are different ideas people was proposing, but I think it's I don't see a very let's say solid answer to this question yet.
I would like to add, I agree with Simeng, and the other thing is, I think we see that already for many aspects of FAIR. The important thing is the metadata, because not everyone can share always all data. It's if you look, for example, on people who before publications, if you look in proprietary data, if you look into data, yeah, a project maybe applies for a patent, they wouldn't share the data itself first. Therefore, I think the most important step is to share the metadata, to know where it comes from, how it was created. And I'm totally with you. Sometimes if you can create data via simulations again in seconds or maybe minutes and maybe 1 hour, it might cost much less just to do that instead of trying to store it, for years. Maybe that's, that is the better way to do it. And I think there is not one answer that fits all. I think it's really dependent on each situation. But metadata is the key in that regard. I think if you have the right metadata and know to reproduce data, then you are on the safe side. You don't always have to have the data itself. Any other comments, questions? With that, I would like to go, in the discussion, in the open discussion. And we had a couple of questions we would like to discuss with you all. With that, so for example, how to create badges that reflect achievements of a person or of a project or a community in a VRE. And so that would be something, so I can take the start. I think if people start to see badges really that they have a value, that it's something they respect, that it's, so I think we get more and more to these mini badges. GitHub does that, there are different systems. And as soon as you start to add that, for example, to your profile, or you see someone from your colleagues, from your peers using them and think, yes, I know that this person is really knowledgeable in this, and I, would trust them with other, recommendations, with other. I think this badge system could really help as soon as people recognize that it has value. I think that is a basic, really, assumption. It has to have value. And yeah, I'm open to other opinions or to additional topics around, how to value, or how to give badges value from the community. Thank you very
I was
much.
often think of these, the airline companies of these membership cards. Because, this is something, of course, airline companies encourage the users, the customer to fly more with them. So they distinguish this, the silver user, golden user, and a platinum, et cetera, et cetera. But that really gives the strong incentive to the customer because they see their, they see the community in the airport. For instance, if you have your luggage with a label of a higher ones, they feel proud of that. And I think for the data part, for the assets, if the research software producer, if they feel, okay, my package, has a better label there, and that implies, might be more user use my software, or my software has a, higher impact. So this implication actually motivates people, let's say, put more time to get their assets, get a higher level of these, badges. So these differentiated labels is really important, but with very clear, measurable criteria, and let the community recognize, this level or criteria. That also comes to your initial question, yes, Erin. So how to define it, and what will be the goal associated with these badges? And for VRE, I think we have a good platform here because it has many users. Each lab, behind each lab is a small community. And this small community is embedded in a bigger international communities with this recognition. Basically, if that helps their publication or their results being reviewed by the peers in the international community, that would be something really be a good incentive model.
We got from Stephanie a nice question
Yes.
regarding this to you, Simi.
Very good. Trigger something. Yes, Stephanie.
Sorry, I was just thinking what could be tangible incentives in this case. I mean, as a frequent flyer, I get priority boarding or extra luggage or whatever. That may be a little bit harder to map in this case, although it would be great if we could. Sorry, Myra.
No, you go ahead.
I wanted to say, happy to come to you in a moment. What I think, which is, you're right. There's this tangible for frequent flyers that they can really feel it. I'm myself a frequent flyer. Something you get nicer boarding, you get luggage for free, things like that. I think with the badges, there might be not the costs that is but I still think a kind of convenience is also coming from the badges. The more environments make it easier. I think the tangible outcome is if developers start to value that they have badges, they will work on making it easier for the user community. it has this, okay, oh, this frame, let's say, let's compare TAPIS and HubZero, for example. If TAPIS would start like having these badges like for fair, then HubZero might be more intrigued also to do it, or vice versa. It's just an example to say, oh yeah, if we can also offer that to the user. And for the user, I think having it easier, that it costs less time, is maybe also a cost factor even. If it's easier and can be integrated better in the research workflow, then the hurdles are lower and you need less time. So maybe that is a tangible outcome, but happy to hear also Sieming's take on that.
The tangible to me is sometimes also to the, you know, the like if there is a research consortium, they want to apply a projects, isn't it? And those ones has a higher, let's say, the level of the badges, they may get chance to be invited. So I think, you know, there could be different ways to make some tangible, let's say, a profit or benefits associated with it. But it's all, of course, that's not going to be same as the airline companies. And researchers care their own, their sense, like acquire funding, get a publication, you know, recognition, etc., etc. This is the benefits they recognize.
Yeah, so the sharing rewards and credit interest group may have some thoughts too. Yeah, absolutely. Myra, yeah.
I was just going to suggest an analogy between badging and accreditation. So there's, it's not the same, but there's some similar themes there where you need to meet particular criteria to get to meet a particular standard to be recognized. So my example here would be, the thing I can think of is the core trust seal. That's for repositories. So there is some sort of need to meet standards of usability for for people who are engaging in infrastructure.
Yeah, I like that. So it came up also in the first session, by the way, the core trust seal, that people refer to it. Yeah, that is great to hear, you know, that people know about the core trust seal. And there is a certain, I think, reputation behind the core trust seal. You know that certain, you know, conditions are fulfilled. And accreditation and badges have a lot of overlap. That is, I at least think that badges are like mini accreditations, you know, because and I think, let's say, a set of badge could maybe lead to accreditation. So that would be my take on the scalability, that with badges you can give already these mini, you know, rewards, accreditations. And if you put, for example, 5 of them together to a bundle, then it could be a bigger thing. Like a core trust seal, but giving already, what I like about the idea with badges, to give already for smaller steps and for smaller offerings a badge, that people are rewarded for doing these steps, that people can say, okay, I did not maybe do all the big things, but I started. And I think rewarding that gets the process for more people into movement.
Just that first step is really it moves everyone in a particular direction, and it gets them I agree, it gets the momentum going. But yeah, the accreditation is a huge way to jump. I think that's a good way to start. And the digital environment is evolving so much, and it's just doing small things is a great way to engage with the community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I like that. Yeah, Stephanie, I like the idea of the reverse budget. So that it's something like, yeah, fans of, because yeah, that is something we did not discuss before. Very cool. So because it increases the reputation. That is, yeah. I'm totally with you, because as a user, if I see something that is offered from developers and you can say, oh, this is great, I like that they offering it now. Of course, that increases also for the developers the incentives to develop this. Seeming, I'll let you also talk, sorry.
No, I was trying to distinguish these different badges. I think there will be certain badges, let's say, act as more like let's say a certified sense for like a level of this achievement. There could also be the badges just like a label, and any community or group of people could define it and distribute it to identify themselves. For instance, if there is a special API, it's defined it, and it's okay, we are the user of that one, and then that becomes a group, isn't it? So I think it could be a nice way to form certain, dynamic communities to generate some effort on certain things. For the VREs, it's certainly very valuable.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, Stephanie added here also that she has seen it in a game community. Yeah, we get often a couple of nice, influences from the game community. That is definitely there.
Yeah.
I like that. And I think badges they come in different flavors. It could be a label. It could be like the core trust seal, like a big step. It could be also something like a badge that authorized you for a certain use. If you have that, you can use a certain environment. So badges have these different flavors. And having this as a label that it's clear for people, oh, they're pointing to something they like. It's a good way really also to spread the word. I really like that. So another question is then, who can give such badges? How do we need to define? Because if we want to create trust, well, do we need some measures behind it to say, oh, this is a group of people who should give badges. This is a group of people have access, to define what is a badge. How do we do this? And for myself, I think there is, I'm a provider and developer also of science gateways, of virtual research environment. I would be happy if there would be rules how I can earn a badge, that I can put it on my virtual research environment. And who should then define these rules? I think this should be the community with working groups. It should be, and that some instances like publishers join that we have different, groups from the community who can define it together. How also the FAIR guiding principles was defined. It was a group of people who defined it with different backgrounds. And that would be my take. I think it should come from a kind of working group from the community, because then also the, recommendations, what is a badge is probably much easier to set than if it's just set by an instance. I don't think that we have in virtual research environment a badge instance that can say, oh, this is like the badges should be defined. Ryan?
Thanks, Sandra. I think this is a really interesting discussion. So I think just on this question, I think it would be good to distinguish with the question of sort of who gives the badges or who rewards the badges. I guess it makes sense to maybe distinguish what the function is or would be of the badges here. So if it's a case of it being a sort of recognition for achieving a certain level of fairness or a contribution to the virtual research environment or the community, I guess that would be more of a peer-reviewed sort of, like you said, kind of working groups of the community. But I guess if it was more of an incentive type thing for, like you mentioned there about having a certain badge to be able to access a certain part of the platform or a certain service or level of the service or whatever, I guess that would be more on the service providers, sort of their in their gift to reward that badge to someone. But then I guess if in the second case there, I guess you would need community buy-in there so that people actually recognize and sort of yeah, people in the wider community recognize that badge sort of given by a service or service developer to kind of give it sort of a some level of credence rather than it just being a sort of password essentially. I think it's a really interesting discussion in general.
Thank you. Yeah, I really like also there are different badges, you know, as we briefly talked about. So I'm totally with you. One can be peer reviewed, but still, if someone uses a software or virtual research environment, the providers or the developers of the virtual research environment have probably to make the rules when you can get really this badge when you use there, because that is then the badge for the user, but the badge for the virtual research environment itself should be peer reviewed, whether that, you know, the whole framework has, you know, has fulfilled this. So yeah, the different levels will have different people who can award that. I'm totally with you.
Yeah, but in either case, I think the criteria has to be transparent and open. It means just like there would be a kind of let's say a portal, people can apply certain badge because they know, okay, the criteria is known, and then there will be group of people sit behind, they review the request, and of course, if it's if they all agree with that case, and it will be issued, of course, through the system. It's very much like in the like in a blockchain smart contract, isn't it? If the condition is there, it's known by everyone. And the applicant also knows more or less he or she is qualified or not. And the rule will be just, you know, the smart contract will just, you know, check each condition. If yes, okay, you will get it automatically. And I think transparency is also very important. We should not let people feel there is a group of people decides whether you're going to get it or not. They should also do the self-assessment, more or less come to the same conclusion, because the criteria is open.
Yeah, and Stephanie brings up that would be like a certification. I think badges are like mini certifications. I think for certification, there's often a higher bar to really get that, to have an official certification for something. I think with badges, we can go these in steps. Like, yeah, I would call it a mini certification. Okay. So another question I think is interesting in this, when the, let's say, badges are defined and open and transparent, how to give them. Can we do it maybe even to make it also easier for everyone in the ecosystem? Can we give them automatically for something, like if it's machine readable? And so that would be a discussion. I have the impression, at least at the beginning, that there might be still an auditing step, at least from the community or something like this, or a peer-to-peer review. But I would love to see that a couple of things, like, you know, how we like to make it easier for users to use tools that can make their data and tools fair. How can we give such badges maybe automatically? Stephanie?
So I don't know if that would make sense, but if you had a fair assessment tool, for example, for a VRE, then you could do that automatically depending on what the results are that come out. You know, you could give a gold, silver, bronze badge or whatever. I mean, and you could sort of ask people to provide this, like the fair assessment tool, their answers. Like you could create a little report automatically that could then be put on the VRE's page or whatever. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you can abuse that in any way you want, but that might be a way of doing something small that is potentially not too hard, as long as you have a fair assessment tool, of course.
Yes, and we have quite some already out there. So I like, some are manual. So we have, for example, where people can go through a list and then it would be not fully automatic. But some are really like findable and accessible. These tests are open or already so automated that this could be part of a badge to say, oh yeah, they achieve this and you can get directly this badge for it. Yeah, the assessment tools are definitely something that needs to be part of an automatic assessment, I think, for badges. Any other opinions about this?
And one thing is that badge should have a clear kind of lifetime, isn't it? And it's also has the metadata to associate to say which rule has been applied to give you this badge. So that people, if for instance, we have the verified VREs, but after 5 years, criteria may change. And people can still trace it back, okay, you had the badge, but that was based on which rule? And maybe in a new rule, that needs to be, rechecked, whatever. So I think this only shows the achievement at a specific time window based on a specific set of rules. It's not an abstract, let's say, label to state a statement, the achievement for, let's say, endless, or I don't know how to say that. Yeah, it has to have certain condition or context.
Yeah. Yeah, a badge with expiry date. I think that makes a lot of sense because our environment changes or tool change. So only because something was openly accessible 5 years ago, that doesn't mean that it's still now again accessible. So I think there needs to be a recheck and maybe something, yeah, expiry date, or that it's like, if you have the badge, it needs to be checked at least once a year, whether you keep the badge, something like that. I think makes a lot of sense. I've seen there was more discussion. Would the tool apply the badge to the dataset digital object or to the dataset and the creator? To the creator. So a fair assessment tool, I think you can have it for a dataset, a digital object, and also a fair assessment tool itself, which is a little bit, this has to eat its own dog food a little bit, because it still has to fit also that it can still do the assessment. Maybe it's, a fair assessment tool has also to be checked once a year. Does it still what it should do in this environment? Does it still check the right, for example, for PIDs? Is maybe the process, do we need to adapt it? So I think, yeah, assessment tools are great, but they also need to follow their own rules to be assessed. Is it openly accessible? Is it, does it work with the environment? It should work, that it can assess the data in a way that it makes a real distinguishment. I really like this discussion. So yeah, and the assessment tools, I think we should really use them for the different complexities of VREs. I briefly introduced that. We can see a VRE like a software framework and really analyze that itself. And then the content of a VRE is different than analyzing the software framework. So I think there are different levels also for the assessment. Okay. So the next question we thought about, and then, oh, we are, oh, yeah, we have 3 minutes left, so maybe we don't manage all our questions, but that was also planned, that we are not running out of questions and discussions. So I have to say, I really enjoyed the discussion. We thought about having maybe a working group on the badging topic. What could be the different kinds of badges? Who is giving these badges? How to define it? And it would be, yeah, wonderful to do that as a working group in a way that it's peer reviewed, that different people can contribute to that. Would people be interested in that? Maybe everyone who is not signing up directly, who would be interested that a working group like this could exist? So I raise my hand.
Right.
Myra, cool. Yeah, several people are raising their hands. That is great. Yeah, because that is what we are considering then. As I said, the Fair for Virtual Research Environment Working Group is wrapping up. We have almost finalized, I think, the final report for it. So it's time to set up maybe something around badges now. And with that, thank you so much, Seeming.
Thank you.
We had a smaller panel than we planned for and a little bit shorter. I apologize again, but yeah, technology, you know. I was so good in starting 15 minutes before the time, but it's, yeah. I'm glad that the Wi-Fi did hold through the session then. Being in a hotel, you know, you never know what happens. And with that, thank you everyone for joining and the nice discussion. And Ryan, is it still holding up the hand for the working group, or you would like to say something?
Oh, sorry, that's in the working group. Sorry, it didn't lower. Apologies.
Oh, no, that is okay. That is all okay. And with that, Seeming, you want to say a last
Thank you very
statement?
much. I think I really enjoyed the discussion, and I think it's a very fruitful discussion. Thanks.
So thank you very much. And I hope everyone did sign up. I did see that people signed up in the notes. That is cool. And with that, I wish you a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. And hopefully see you in the future when we build a new working group.
See you in the future. Yes. Have a nice
Okay.
day.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Bye bye.
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 Bye.